We have looked at great kings and noble houses, powerful banking families and aristocratic dynasties. People know the names like Habsburg and Bourbon, Romanov and Hanover. Yet this is only one half of the equation. Much of how history is taught is quite misleading, placing emphasis on the status, wealth, and power that passes from father to son. Yet in the social structures which developed in the West, the majority of status and social position was managed by one's mother. Much of what people have come to imagine of the past has some powerful man out in front, while his wife and daughters are presumably at home doing nothing. Yet this is entirely untrue, as the power and positioning of the most powerful families of the West have always been managed by their women. Yet as each generation, the name changes from mother to daughter. The matrilineal lineages of Europe's most powerful families can be quite difficult to track. However, these records are not lost, for particularly with the nature of dowries, the true status and social position of Europe's aristocratic families, whether noble or a more modern business and banking family, flows through its mothers and daughters. And while there are no names of these houses, since with each generation they take on the names of their husbands, they can certainly be thought of as aristocratic families in their own right. So let's take a look at some of these families which pass matrilineally, the mothers of empires, the daughters of fortune, and the wives of dynasties. Easily one of the most notable female rulers of European history was Eleanor of Aquitaine, the Duchess of Aquitaine from 1137 to 1204. At this point, the Kingdom of France was very loosely held together, and through her marriage to King Louis VII, she would be queen consort of the Franks, and the mother to French nobility in the House of Capet. Yet, though not a queen in Aquitaine, Aquitaine was the wealthiest part of France, and enormous, and as a ruling duchess, in many regards, her title of nobility was perhaps worth more than being French monarch. Yet in 1152, she would marry Henry II, the King of England in the House of Anjou, going on to mother Henry the Young King, King Richard the Lionheart, and King John, amongst other noble children. And while the kings of England are her notable male children, if we trace her descendants mother to daughter, we find many very significant figures, including Marie, Latin Empress, Berengaria, the Queen of Castile, notably a ruling queen regnant, and not queen consort. Further descendants who would be Latin Empress, Saint Isabel of France, Queen Blanche of France, Queen Joan of Sicily, and Queen Eleanor of Aragon. As well, we find many ruling kings, including King Sancho II of Portugal, Alfonso III of Portugal, Saint Louis IX, King of France, Henry I of Castile, Otto IV, the Holy Roman Emperor, and Charles I, King of Sicily. Throughout the High Middle Ages, both her male and female descendants were regularly at the top of European power. Yet unfortunately for our purposes, her direct matrilineal lineage begins to go cold. However, we do find her descendants to have intermarried and had children with another house of this sort, the descendants of Beatrice, the Countess of Provence. Her female descendants would sit on many thrones, particularly many in Britain, as well as France, Sicily, Navarre, Aragon, and Norway. Through her descendant, Queen Eleanor of England, we find centuries of prominent female rulers and consorts, continuing into the 16th century with Mary, Queen of Scots. Unfortunately, this trail begins to go cold as well, at least in notable title. There remain descendants of this lineage quite prominent today. However, via an early marriage between Beatrice and Count Ramon IV, we get to what is perhaps the most successful matrilineal lineage in all history. And this is where it really begins to get interesting. Garsenda, the Countess of Forcalquier, from 1209 to 1220, created an unbroken chain of some of the most powerful women in all the world. Her descendants would include Queens of Castile, Queens of Navarre, Queens of France, Queens of Hungary, Queens of Bohemia, Queens of Poland, Holy Roman Empresses, and many others. Catherine the Great, The Empress of Russia can trace direct matrilineal descent to Garsenda, as well can King Louis XV of France. Yet one place where it begins to get particularly interesting is Queen Victoria. Through her daughter Alice, we find descendants Alexandra, Empress of Russia, Louise, Queen of Sweden, through her daughter Beatrice, Victoria of Spain, and through her daughter Victoria, who herself was Empress Consort of Germany. Married to German Emperor Frederick III, we find Queen Sophia of Greece, Helene, Queen Mother of Romania, and Queen Sophia of Spain, queen until 2014, and thus matrilineally, King Philippe of Spain is a direct descendant of Garsenda. Prince Consort Philip, who died in 2021, was the son of Alice of Battenberg, herself the daughter of Victoria of Hesse by Rhine, who was in turn the daughter of Alice, Queen Victoria's daughter, making the current King Charles a matrilineal descendant of this house with only 1 degree of patrilineal removal. Another reigning monarch who can trace this direct descent is Carl Gustav of Sweden. He is the son of Sibylla of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a Garsenda descendant, and Gustav Adolf of Sweden, Duke of Västerbotten. Through him we find another very notable lineage, the descendants of Maria Louise, the Countess of Leiningen-Dagsburg-Falkenberg. Through her we find Teresa, Queen of Bavaria, Sophia of Sweden, and Queen Emma of the Netherlands. Emma's descendants would include a line of Dutch queens, continuing to Queen Beatrice, the Queen Regnant of the Netherlands, until 2013, making an unbroken matrilineal chain until the current king, Willem Alexander. These are the most notable matrilineal lines, but there are far more. Many of the most powerful Eastern European rulers can trace matrilineal descent from the Byzantine Empress Euphrosyne, Empress from 1195 to 1203, many from Isabella, Queen of Castile, from 1447 to 1454, the Holy Roman Empress Barbara, from 1433 to 1437. Through intermarriage, Bianca of Naples would begin a long matrilineal chain connected through the House of Savoy, and Garsenda descendant Theodora of Leiningen would be the maternal ancestor of the Bernadotte and Bourbon families. So while we can look at the thrones of Europe, many of the most powerful nobility and the most powerful banking families, and see their names, easily see father to son where they came from, hidden just under the surface, are dynasties just as real, many unbroken, tracing back to, in some cases, medieval countesses, duchesses, and queens, the thrones of the United Kingdom, Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Luxembourg. Today, all have ancestry like this, for while having the proper patrilineal descent is significant in a monarch, it's equally, and in some cases more important, to ensure that the next generation will have the proper mother. Because of the significance that having the correct mother for a future monarch holds, these chains of proper wives and mothers have remained unbroken for many lifetimes, in turn creating extraordinarily powerful dynasties of women. And let's look deeper at that social role. Beginning in the medieval period, perhaps one of the most substantial roles was as the diplomatic linchpin between dynastic families. It would be the marriage to a family's daughter that would determine future alliances. And quite notably, with these marriages would come quite often enormous dowries. And while what people imagine is often something like a powerful noble paying another noble to marry his daughter, what was actually happening was that vast sums of the family's wealth moved with the daughter. And that wealth did not become the husband's wealth, it stayed with the woman. She retained the wealth. And going forward to today, in the majority of cases, wealth flows matrilineally. And thus, if we are looking at the wealthiest and most powerful families of the West, and we truly want to track wealth, we should track matrilineal descent. In the medieval period as well, you would see a great number of regents, women who acted functionally as monarch or noble on behalf of a young or disposed king, duke, count, etc. Women would be the primary ones involved in the mediation of disputes, being the ones who actually maintained the alliances of families, mediating disagreements and aligning interests. They would as well forge social alliances. While there may be direct formal relationships between males, most of the actual day-to-day relationships were being cultivated by the women of the families. They as well were enormous patrons of the arts, and particularly as the High Middle Ages went on, became the dominant drivers of arts and culture. They were communicators, trendsetters, and they were where the wealth stayed. In the early modern period, we begin to see more of an emphasis on women as the standard bearers of virtue. They set social standards. A society would look to its women in order to gauge what the social norms were, what was acceptable and what was not. They would increasingly take on the role of educator of their children, imparting both knowledge and virtue to them, and in turn, creating further generations, setting the modern standards of centuries. During the early modern period, increasingly, noble wives were becoming viewed as partners within the estate and politics. They would often manage correspondences, arrange and maintain patronage networks, represent the family ceremonially, and increasingly, as years went on, take on the task of intercession, petitioning a male ruler on the behalf of other males, in turn acting as power broker. And as this went on, more and more power would accrue to the women of the most powerful families, as while a particular office or title holder would likely be a male in most cases. If you wanted to access such a person, if you wanted something done, if you wanted something your way, then the power broker would most likely be a woman of the family. And when we look at this today, you have to ask the question, who's actually more powerful? Somebody like a senator? Or the power brokers who remain in the shadows and actually decide what gets passed and who has whose ear? Continuing on in the early modern period, we would see a number of powerful regents, figures like Catherine de' Medici or Emily Elizabeth of Hesse-Kassel. And as years went on and we get to the modern period of today, increasingly women began to become more and more outward-facing, becoming the social representatives of these families. They had now fully solidified as the moral compass of the family, setting social and moral standards across all the West. What society found to be acceptable and not acceptable, as well as what was required, was set by these women. More and more would dedicate themselves to diplomacy, and as mass media emerged, as media figures, becoming more and more visible, often some taking roles in the businesses of their families. Particularly often, whenever there is a crisis, it will be the mother of the family who enters in an emergency, stepping away from her more social roles to deal with it. Yet beyond that, the women of the most powerful families began to view their role as to protect their family as an institution, representing the family publicly, and engaging in formal diplomacy, all the while continuing to be the conduits of wealth, and being the heart of where status and power were transferred between generations. So when we ask the question, what are the most powerful families of the world? Should we look at the Windsors, the Orange Nassaus, perhaps the Bernadottes or Bourbons? Maybe we'll look at the Rothschilds, the Berenbergs or Pictets, or perhaps when we do this we are thinking about how families work entirely wrong. For with whom does the wealth actually flow? Who actually maintains relationships? Who actually sets a dynasty between families? Who forges alliances? Who holds the social power? Perhaps instead of these names we should be thinking of ones altogether different, often unknown. Perhaps we should be thinking of Garsenda, Eleanor, Beatrice, Maria Theresa, Ermengarde, and Bianca. For it is my proposal that to actually understand how wealth, power, and position flow between families, one should pay attention to the mothers. And once we do that, we see an entirely new set of noble houses, the Matrilineal Dynasties that run the world.